You know, I love the SH Monster Arts Godzilla, but at $60, he's a bit of a pricey date. Yes, his sculpt is amazing, his paint applications are great, and his articulation is also wonderful. So he's a great figure, but there's gotta be an alternative. And you know, he's a bit plain for some people, but that's fine with me. Though if you want something a bit more cinematic with more flash, and you want to spend a bit less, then there's something in store for you. The good people at NECA have released the King of the Monsters Godzilla Atomic Blast figure. This version's just a bit different from the standard, and as you can see here, he's shown with his spines glowing, ready for battle. This is similar to the way he looks in the movie. And of course, since he's a battle-ready version of Godzilla, he has to come with something indicative of him ready to destroy. But if you turn this figure to the side, you'll see that the box states that other than him measuring 12 inches in length and him having over 25 points of articulation, he also comes with a hinged jaw and a blast accessory. Now, the SH Monster Arts Godzilla also comes with a blast accessory, but this one just seems to have a little bit more flair to it. Now, if we turn the box to the side here, we can see him using his atomic blast, but there's a bit of an additional flair here. It shows the blast doing damage, and I rather like that. Now, this is one figure of several in this series. There's a regular Godzilla as well, without all this crazy color scheme. There's also the adorable Mothra, and finally our boy Rodan. The other side of the box has a ton of text, but I am not going to bother to read all this, because I'd rather open this boy up and show you his windowed display, which looks pretty darn good if you ask me. At first glance, I thought he looked a little bit cheap, but the more I look at him, the more I'm appreciating this extra design. Here, he's looking amazing. He's under some light blue glow, which really makes the figure pop nicely. If you've seen the movie, you'll know that he's constantly got this blue glow because it's indicative of him being ready to attack. And regardless of him looking incredibly blue in this picture, the figure itself has a bit of a different color scheme than that, which looks great. So let's open this boy up and see how he fares. He comes with instructions telling you to heat up his tail before attaching it, of course, but I am a pro and I can do this without that. And I've got to say, this is pretty darn nice. The background here is pretty effective. It's from the scenes, of course, where he's fighting in the ocean and there's lightning going on and all that stuff, but this is not that important here. Little boats aside, let's put it to the back and really take a look at this figure. Once you remove some of the shine from the plastic packaging, you get to see a little bit more of the figure popping. This is pretty good, but he's tied in there with some zip ties, so bear with me a moment. Are you kidding me? Do they even sell this thing in stores? Who the hell's gonna steal it? Okay, so that was surprisingly painless. He was tied in there with one big group of ties that were all sort of in the same area, and now we get to see the figure for what he is, but wow, he's missing his tail. Though it's a rather simple fitting, it's just a simple ball joint and you can plug that right into here, so bear with me just another moment. And how fitting is it to bring out the turntable with water on it, because most of this movie he's fighting in the water, but still, here's the figure itself. And honestly, I'm not disappointed in this at all. I'm surprised at how good this thing actually looks. The paint apps on this are spectacular. I didn't expect them to be this nice. I kind of thought at first it looked a little bit cheesy, but now that I can see it face to face, I'm pretty impressed. The figure is much different than the SH Monster Arts. The plastic that they use itself is a far different feel. He also feels a lot more solid than the SH Monster Arts, whereas he is a lot of shell, this one seems pretty solid through and through. Now that doesn't make him perfect. This figure does seem to have very loose joints. The thing just kind of flops around, which is fine. I mean, you can always tighten them, but right out of the box, I'm expecting a little bit more. But still, this thing is pretty much what you would want out of a Godzilla figure. He looks good, his paint's great, and he seems decently posable enough, but let's get into that now. Of course, his legs are the weirdest of all the joints, where they can kind of just sort of turn up and down, which I guess is fine. Like I said before, you don't need to make this thing karate kick. His knee doesn't have any bend at all, surprisingly, which is weird because there's sort of a faux joint where you can kind of rotate it, but really not much here. His foot is rather nicely jointed. It's very seamless. If you can see here, there's really almost nowhere that you can see that seam, and it is just a simple swivel, but that's also fine. This thing doesn't need to be pivoting his foot too much because then he would just fall over. He's meant to just stand right up, and that's pretty much all you're going to get out of Godzilla because he doesn't leap up in the air. This isn't the Showa era. The tail, of course, is rather important as well, as this thing has a ton of little joints in it which allows it to move pretty freely, but it's not perfect. You can still see that some areas are looser than others, but I wasn't expecting to make this thing turn into a big G or something to represent his name. Still, I'm surprised at how much I'm liking this. Those paint apps are just glorious. If you look at his spine, you can see there's so much shine. This is the Atomic Blast Godzilla, and truly he does look atomic. Perhaps most impressive is that face. Those glowing white eyes are incredibly expressive. The mouth is simple, and it can open up, but honestly, it's really not necessary. Sure, it looks a little bit better this way, but there are some gentle paint apps inside there. He has a bit of blue in his mouth. Even his teeth seem to have a blue tint to them, but his tongue is incredibly dark cobalt blue. The brows have a little hint of blue in them as well, and it all works incredibly well. The other Godzilla that I have is incredibly dark and black almost. This one almost entirely is consistent of aquamarine and greenish blue kind of textures, and it works. This isn't your standard Godzilla. This is one that is powered up and ready to fight with his atomic blasts. His arms also have a gentle swivel here, nothing to write home about. It does have a little bit of pivot action there as well, which is a nice change from the other part. His elbow can go in and out, and that's all you'll really get. And his hands have a little swivel here. And they can even pivot too, because they're on a strange joint that actually has some up and down movement out of it. But this one seems to move more than that one. It seems to be more recessed. I mean, why the hell you would need Godzilla to do this pose is beyond me, but it's pretty funny. Hilariously, he does have a ball joint here at his waist, but it's incredibly inflexible. Obviously enough, those spines make it so that he can hardly move, but I appreciate them trying, though still, it just makes him look a little looser, but I guess it does help a slight bit. He's not going to get any sort of crunch out of that, but it is there, so if you want to use it, you can. Now, the last point of articulation is going to be in his head. His head can go side to side, but only just ever so gently. It goes up and down very slightly, but not enough to write home about. I wouldn't really call that a point of articulation in that regard, but you can get that swivel side to side, and it is rather squeaky, so it's nice and tight. His jaw is, of course, a hingeable jaw, which we saw on the box, and that would lead me into the next part. It would seem that the many toy manufacturers have learned the error of their ways, and a lot of them didn't come with accessories that would do his atomic blast in the past. Some of the SH Monster Arts don't even come with it, and those are $60, $70 figures originally. This guy's $30, and he comes with this giant atomic blast, which I would say is pretty impressive. Now, more than that, he comes with another effects part, which is going to be this splash, which shows the atomic blast taking effect and actually doing some damage. This is incredibly cool. I like this a lot, especially because this opens him up to be put into battle poses with other figures. So good on them, and it's an incredibly weird texture. This thing is really light and almost sort of matted, so it doesn't feel quite like him, which I guess is nice because it really differentiates it from the other parts. The other side isn't skimmed on either. There's plenty of effect and paint and lots of these graded marks here, which look really good. You see up close, there is an intense amount of texture on both of these parts. I'd even go as far as to say this is on par with that clear plastic that we got from the SH Monster Arts effect. But it's not perfect because if you take a look here, you can see that there is some molding lines, which does create a little bit of a break in the immersion, but I'm not going to write home too much about that. Though he is big. As they stated on the box, he measures from head to tail 12 inches. As you can see here, the ruler would be, 12 inches there. And while that's impressive, it's not incredibly important. His effects part is pretty simple. From what I can tell, all you do is jam the thing in his mouth, and it sort of just sockets on his tongue. But if you do that, it's just going to fall. So I'm assuming you're meant to put this thing in his mouth, then close his jaw a little bit, and now he's kind of still just letting it hang, which works. I just don't like how loose it is. And then if you want that extra explosion, you'll just kind of socket that there. And there you go. Works pretty good. I do like how light this part is. It's not heavy like the one that comes with the SH Monster Arts, and I don't fear this thing breaking his jaw over time. That's another important thing, is sustainability over these figures, because if you want to display them, you want them to be posable for a long time. And this thing seems pretty durable. That's one thing I will give this figure. The NECA seems very solid, so with that being said, the thing doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart. Now, when I'm handling the SH Monster Arts figure, however, it's a little bit more delicate, and I feel like I have to be more careful. Also, the scale here seems incredibly different. If you take a look at our boy here, his head is rather large. It's about the size of part of my thumb. But if you put the other Godzilla figure here, his head is incredibly tiny and bottled to a very sharp point where this thing is nowhere near as big. And there's a look at the two of them side by side. Like I said, there's really no comparison. The SH Monster Arts is far more realistic, I guess you could say, and in such, it does do its job well. Though, if you want something more cinematic, the NECA figure is perfect for that. But with that out of the way, let's talk about the source material of these figures, and that's going to be Godzilla, King of the Monsters. As you can see here, I got the Best Buy exclusive Steelbook edition, and I gotta say, this thing looks amazing. This is the 4K Ultra HD version, so it looks super good when you play it on a nice TV, and the back of it is covered in pictures and text, but if we take off this wrapper, you'll see something a little bit more surprising. Once we remove this glued-on cardboard cover, we can see that the back is adorned with the image of King Ghidorah himself, and this looks awesome. When you open it up, you get to see the two side by side, and that is a great display piece. This thing looks amazing, and I'm not a big Steelbook guy because these things typically seem to get damaged, but typically right out of the box I've noticed scratches, whereas this thing so far looks pretty much perfect. Inside, of course, there's a digital copy of the movie that goes in here, but I removed the insert so you guys don't steal my movie, which shows a picture of Rodan now. And if you take this disc out, and this disc, we get to see our lovely little Mothra. So all of the monsters are represented on this case, which I think is really smart design. Or perhaps it's just a nice coincidence that there were 4 monsters in the movie, and of course 4 panels to a DVD case. So ultimately, I don't think I would recommend the NECA figure over the SH Monster Arts, but I would say he is a solid addition to anybody's collection. If you just want a nice Godzilla figure that looks a little flashy and has some accessory parts, then this one is perfect for you. He's stylized much differently than the other figures, so that's definitely a plus, but some people might see that as a minus. I feel much less worse about keeping him on a shelf and letting him be displayed because I don't fear him getting damaged. He's far more solid than the SH Monster Arts figure, and I trust handling him much more than the other. I have to be dainty and careful with the SH Monster Arts, and when you think about Godzilla, that just doesn't make much sense. You can get the NECA figure from anywhere between $30 and $35. Meanwhile, the SH Monster Arts is between about $60 and $70. I'd say for half the price, it is a pretty nice figure to have, though you will be sacrificing some features. This figure is far less posable, and I found this out while I was trying to take pictures of him. His legs wobble quite a bit, and that waist joint is really unreliable. It just kind of lets him flop around. You can't pivot his neck at all, so you can't make him do the shooting his blast up into the sky pose, nor can you really make him shoot it anywhere but down. I tried to get the two to match blasts, but unfortunately it's just impossible. Though it's not all bad. He just kind of stands in one position, and yes, you can move his arms, but ultimately, there's only so much you can do with that. So, if you want something simple that you don't have to worry too much about, get the NECA figure. But if you want something that is a true representation of Godzilla and looks perfect in photos with far better articulation, then get the Monster Arts. Either way, I wouldn't say that either of these figures are bad. I just personally prefer the Monster Arts because it's just a bit more of a collectible for me. I feel like I could find this NECA figure at a toy store. It's not terrible, but I do consider the NECA figure more like a toy. I would trust a kid with it before I would ever let them near the Monster Arts figure. So with that said, I will give this NECA figure a 7 out of 10. It's fair enough, but it just doesn't give me everything I want. If he had a little better posability, I'd give him an 8 and maybe even edge him up to a 9 because this thing does look phenomenal. But he falls just short and I'd say he's pretty average. Still, don't get me wrong, NECA makes amazing figures and this is no different than the rest. This is great, the quality is amazing, the craftsmanship is phenomenal, and if you want a good Godzilla figure, this certainly is in the running. But with all that out of the way, what do you think? Do you like the Monster Arts version, or do you prefer the simpler, chunkier, more cinematic version that's the NECA version? Let me know in the comments below. And if you did like this video, please leave it a like. Make sure to subscribe because I'm always making new videos, and if you haven't seen the video I'm linking on screen, go ahead and click it. It does help the channel out. With all that said, have an amazing weekend. I'll see you in the next review. Keep on collecting, and hail to the king, baby.